So in case there's anybody logged on who I have not met, I'm Megan Carney, and I coordinate the Sustainability Fellows program here at UNH. So on behalf of the fellows and the social innovation interns, we're pleased to welcome you to our 6th alumni panel webinar. We took last week off from the webinar series for the fellows midterm presentations. Fellows, you were awesome. I know it was a lot of work to prepare, and I hope you got a lot out of it. Interns, thank you so much for tuning in to hear about the fellows' work. I hope you learned something useful as well. If nothing else, I think it's a good reminder that this work is hard. It's messy, there is no right path, and the circumstances are especially challenging this year, but we still have to find a way to make forward progress. And the fellows are doing that, and they're really doing it in style. It's always helpful for me to be reminded that we're all in this together. So next week, we will get to hear from the interns about how they've been navigating their projects this summer. And we're really looking forward to that. So fellows, please make sure to register for the Interns Showcase, which is next Thursday. So today will be our last webinar of the original webinar series that we planned. We're planning a bonus webinar in 2 weeks, which I will remind you about later. But for today, we are going to hear from some alumni and partners who work in public health and sustainable food systems. I don't think we realized how timely these topics would be when we originally conceived of this webinar, but the situation we're in now has really served to highlight just how much work there is to do in terms of creating systems to support public health and food production, and most importantly, equitable access to what those systems can offer. Clearly, there is lots of opportunity to engage in this field, and today's panel will give you an idea of what some of those possibilities look like. As always, we've aligned the webinar with the SDGs. So today there are 2. SDG number 2 is Zero Hunger, and SDG number 3 is Good Health and Well-Being. We'll start with a quick video which focuses on the first, but clearly these 2 SDGs are intricately connected. Faina, would you go ahead and start the video?
Another drought, another famine. This is nothing new.
Millions of people are on the verge of starvation.
Does anybody care anymore? Sometimes it seems like nothing more than another distant headline competing for our attention.
This is not a headline. This is real life.
In a few years, there'll be 10 billion people on the planet. How many of us will go hungry then?
One food crisis after another. The number of hungry people across our planet on the rise. And the causes? Droughts, floods, but also our wars, our conflicts and violence.
This makes no sense. We are causing it.
So what kind of future is waiting for us?
You could almost say famine and hunger are man-made. But if this is true, could we also be the ones to change?
We have one food future, or no future at all. If we don't change things, who will?
There's enough food for everyone. We need to respect our food, the people who grow it, and the people who don't have enough.
Imagine a future in which every person on Earth could have nourishing food every day.
A future where leaving home could be a choice.
And where all farmers could sow seeds for a better, sustainable future.
What if everyone had the power to secure that future today?
There is only one future. We have the power to choose what it looks like.
No matter who we are or where we are, we all want the same thing.
Our actions are our future.
A zero hunger world is possible if we work together.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. I'm Faina Bucher, and I'm the Program Director for the Changemaker Collaborative, formerly the Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise. And I oversee the Summer Social Innovation Internship Program. And I'm excited to introduce today our moderator, Lisa Drake. Lisa is the Director of Sustainability Innovation at Stonyfield. And she's led the development and implementation of innovative strategies to advance the company on its sustainability journey since 2002. Tim Grenier, Managing Director of Pure Strategies, a sustainability consultancy to leading businesses, has been quoted to say, quote, Few companies have demonstrated as deep a commitment to environmental leadership as Stonyfield Organic. The company has accomplished many firsts. The first national organic yogurt brand, first US manufacturer to offset 100% of facility energy GHG emissions, the first biopolymer yogurt packaging solution, and one of the first to estimate a dairy company's full life cycle carbon footprint in the industry. In 2019, they announced a new goal to reduce 30% in carbon emissions by 2030. It's easy to see that a healthy planet is one of Stonyfield's guiding tenets. In addition to all the great work that Lisa does at Stonyfield, she's also on the steering committees for the series Coalition Businesses for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy and the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, the advisory board of the New Hampshire Food Bank, and is co-chair of the board of directors for New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. Prior to Stonyfield, Lisa managed economic development programs for the state of New Jersey and was a project manager and licensed professional engineer for CDM Smith & Barr Engineering. With a BS and MS degrees in civil and environmental engineering from Tufts University, Lisa has a passion for healthy food, healthy people, and a healthy planet. Today, we're incredibly lucky and honored to have her join us as a moderator. And with that, I'll hand the webinar over to you, Lisa. Thanks again.
Thank you, Faina. Thanks for that great intro. I can skip anything about me, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Stonyfield. But really happy to join you. Love engaging with this program and with the awesome students in this program. We've had interns from the program, most recently Keegan Smith, I guess 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago now, who's now working at Coca-Cola. So he's stayed in the food space, which is awesome. And then one of your fellows this year, Ariella Sella, who's on the call here, she was an intern with us last summer and did some really great work helping us benchmark and start to build strategy towards that science-based target that you mentioned, and specifically on our sustainable packaging work. So Ariella was a great contributor to that last summer through an internship. So I'm glad to see she's continuing on here. So that video, I mean, I really like that video. You know, it really sums up the big picture of, you know, where we're headed with 10 billion or more people on the planet and the pressure that puts on our natural resources. And I also found it interesting, you know, they're referencing droughts and floods and conflict and didn't directly mention climate change. And, you know, I think in the food system, you know, the food industry is greatly rising to the occasion, I think, probably not urgently enough, and but more readily than a lot of other industries. And I really think that's because food, when you're a food company, your supply chain is so impacted by climate that it's really hard to ignore. And so whether you are concerned about people or concerned about the environment or just concerned about business risk and profitability, you can't ignore what's happening in agriculture and in our supply chains. You know, here in the Northeast, we're closest to our dairy farms, that part of our supply chain. And, you know, we do see the farmers experiencing heavier precipitation events intermixed with periods of drought, and how much harder that is on their work, and, you know, the heat particularly hard on the animals. So we, you know, have a long history in working on these issues, and, you know, we continue to be as serious about climate change as we ever have been. And, you know, just one other piece that I wanted to share was about our work with Wolf's Neck Farm in Maine and some other partners, and we're part of a program called Open Team. And Open Team is developing tools that farmers anywhere around the world eventually will be able to access to measure many aspects of their farm operations, but particularly with focus on soil carbon and applications that will help them measure and monitor, make improvements that will help sequester more carbon in the soil and measure the results. And so we're really excited about that technology innovation that we are starting now with some of our dairy farms, but it will be eventually available to any farm in the world to contribute to a solution for climate change. So we're really excited about that. And I think the other thing I wanted to hit on was just about the importance that we see of companies speaking up and being a vocal advocate for climate change. And Stonyfield has been very involved in policy discussions in agriculture, organic standards, but also climate change and clean energy. And we think it's really important that policymakers need to hear stories from businesses and understand how this impacts us and why we're concerned about it. The pandemic situation has only reinforced this in many ways. And, we're learning that our food systems maybe are not as resilient as we might have thought, or at least we're learning where some of the weaknesses are. We know that it was pretty scary to a lot of us to go to the grocery store and see bare shelves back in March and April. And I think we all learned a lot from that in terms of, we experienced great growth in demand for a short period of time, and we're experiencing shifts in buying habits for consumers. But, we've learned that the food industry can't necessarily shift on a dime, that there's capacity constraints along the way. There's labor constraints, especially when borders get closed, that, manufacturing practices can be hard to shift. The meat industry is a low automation, high people density kind of thing. And what happened? I mean, they didn't change their practices for a number of reasons, some of which are challenging to address, but they put their employee base at risk and had a lot of transmission. And so there's all kinds of things that we have learned, unfortunately, through this pandemic, that if we can learn from and build more resiliency across the food system. So I think it's a really exciting place to be and a lot of challenging work here. So just happy to be sharing some thoughts and introducing our panelists here who will be really exciting to hear their stories about where they came from out of UNH and where they are now. So I guess we'll start with Julia, if that's okay, Julia. This is Julia Nimi, project manager with Gaia Vaccine Foundation.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. Yeah, I'll just start with sharing a little bit about my young career. I just graduated from college 2 years ago, so I'm new to all of this. But yeah, UNH was, of course, a great experience right after I graduated. So I did the program in 2018 and was working with the African Alliance of Rhode Island in Providence, which is how I came to Providence, and I'm actually still in Providence. So I'm very grateful for UNH for introducing me to this city. But yeah, I'll just backtrack a little bit. So yeah, I graduated from Bates College in 2018. I was environmental studies and French double major there. And so I think I've always been interested in sustainability from a young age, and French as well. So it kind of happened naturally that I chose those two majors. And then when I was considering going abroad, the only program to study abroad my junior year that combined both the majors was a program in Madagascar through SIT that was biodiversity and natural resource management. So it was environmental focused, but in a French-speaking country. So that kind of took me there. And then it was kind of my first introduction to doing research and also living in a developing country where French is the national language. So I gained a lot from Madagascar and then became really interested in the African community in Lewiston in Maine, where Bates is located. So when I came back, I started working in the community there's quite since 2000, there was a big influx of Somali Bantu refugees to Lewiston. And then the past couple of years, there's been a lot of immigrants from asylum seekers, primarily from other African countries, a lot of them who are French speakers from the DRC, Djibouti, Angola, which they speak Portuguese, but a lot of them actually speak French from the school system. So anyway, I became involved in that community, and that kind of got my interest started in French speaking Africa. And then I got a grant through Bates to study French in Senegal all in summer. So then when I was going into my senior year, I was really interested in doing more research on the Djibouti community, specifically in Lewiston. Djibouti is a super, super tiny country, about the size of New Hampshire, actually, in East Africa. And so that kind of started my research experience. And then I was working with them, and then was also working with the Somali Bantu Community Association of Maine, Lewis, and Auburn, which they have farms throughout central Maine. And the project was it was for my environmental studies capstone, and the project was about soil fertility on their farms. So then I was doing all this work, and then when I was looking for programs for after I graduated, I came across UNH's program, and there was a position working with the African Alliance of Rhode Island here in Providence, or in South Providence, for creating a new farmers market in Lewiston, or in Providence, based on including culturally relevant food, mostly catering to the African communities in Providence, but other minority communities as well. So then I worked here right after graduation. So I think we started the program in UNH like 2 days after graduation. So it's a quick turnaround. But I was there for the summer 2018. So it was a really great experience. African Alliance of Rhode Island is a very, very small nonprofit. So there's about 2 people in the office, which is the founder, Julius, and his assistant. And so we were working on creating 3 pop-up farmers markets to kind of test different locations in Providence of where would be the most feasible, and then introducing foods like yucca, papaya, plantains to the farmers market. So anyway, and then that was going on and still continuing, actually. And I know UNH had a fellow last year. And then, so that was the summer. And then after, I was doing a Fulbright grant in Rwanda, in East Africa as well, for 9 months. So I actually just came back last June, so just about a year ago. So I was working there at the embassy teaching English. They have like a language center, and then coordinating the other English programs. And then after that, actually, so when I was looking for jobs, I was on Idealist, one of the common ways you find jobs these days, and saw a position in Providence, which of course sparked my eye. And so it was through Gaia Vaccine Foundation, which was, we work in, so Gaia Vaccine Foundation stands for Global Alliance to Immunize Against AIDS, but it's a public health organization in Mali, in West Africa. And so we primarily focus on preventing infectious disease in Mali, which is of course very relevant now. So we have a lot of programs for HIV, HPV, cervical cancer screenings, and of course, COVID prevention right now. So I'm the project manager here in Providence. We have a small office here, and so I coordinate with the team in Mali and manage the day-to-day operations here in Providence. But I won't take up too much time. Anyway, thanks.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Julia. Our next panelist is Greg Williams, Director of Waste Solutions at AgriCycle. Greg, are you there?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd think I'd have this down by now. After
No problem.
No, basically, just wanted to say thanks for having me here. This is really fun to be a part of this group again this year. And was just going to kind of dovetail to what Julia was saying, in the sense that, I think the environment's been something that I've always, felt passionately about. And I was a geology major as an undergraduate, and worked at a landfill at one point during college, and got involved in recycling efforts on campus during school. So it's always just been something that I've really felt strongly about. And I was a reporter for a number of years for a newspaper in Maine, and focused mostly on environmental and planning issues. And the planning piece was what sort of got me to start thinking about more education. So I ended up going to the Muskie School of Public Service in Portland, which is focused on community planning, more at the small town scale, more like the New England scale versus urban planning. So I went to that program as sort of an older degree holder in my late 30s, and got involved in Clean Air Cool Planet during that time, and was a fellow in 2008. So I think we were figuring out that that was the first year. So, and that really paved the way, I think, for a lot of the things that I'm doing now. So I feel really grateful for the program. I worked really closely with the city of Portland on an energy audit for the buildings and different facilities around the city, and worked specifically with Troy Moon, who at the time was the waste manager for essentially for the city. Now he's the sustainability manager. But we worked really closely together, and through that work together, and through my work at the graduate program, I started to get really involved in food waste programs around for different municipalities, specifically different models on the West Coast where it was happening a little bit more, it was a little more mature over there. And I ended up doing my graduate thesis on community scale composting programs. And through that, I got into a business plan competition that a friend of mine and I ended up winning in the state of Maine, which we were kind of surprised, but we got it. And there were no jobs at the time. So we decided, what the heck, let's start a business. There's nothing going on. And he also was, a planning student. So we were making all these connections through Clean Air Cool Planet and some of the other graduate work, but really getting to learn a lot of the different city roles and the different people that would be really helpful partners in getting a program together. So we did that with the city of Portland for a number of years. And then I moved on eventually to AgriCycle. So I've been at AgriCycle for about 6 years, and really focused on developing new programs with municipalities and corporations and universities. We work with UNH to a certain degree, Brown down in Providence, actually, we've been working with, and Wellesley and a number of other schools. But and we're actually talking to the town of Durham right now about doing a transfer station program. So it's been really fun and really an exciting time as it's becoming more mainstream, the whole idea of taking food waste out of the waste stream, and primarily and first and foremost making sure it goes to food banks if it's recoverable, and if it's not, then finding the right home for it. But there's more to be said about it when the question and answers come. But thanks for having me.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, we're going to be, we have one more panelist here to give you her background, some of her story, and then we'll go to some questions. So if you have questions already, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll call on folks to share their questions as we go. So next we can hear from Sabrina Kieran, who is an impact analyst at Root Capital. Thanks for joining us, Sabrina.
Great. Let me know if you can hear me. I know I was having some volume issues before, but yeah, it's
great now.
Great. We're doing the streets having some jackhammer construction work today, so I'll also apologize if you hear background noise. But very nice to meet you all. I also second thank you for having me today. Yeah, so I think my career story started in undergrad. I studied international political economy and Spanish language and literature at Fordham University in New York. I was very focused on working in the international development space in some capacity. It was around the time that the SDGs were really gaining traction and were interwoven in a lot of the coursework I was taking. After college, I wanted to get some international work experience, so I ended up accepting an internship with the Foundation for Sustainable Development, which is a small NGO based out of San Francisco that had a satellite office in northern Argentina. So I went down there for a microfinance internship and ended up staying on as their full-time program coordinator, helping to coordinate the different internship and student placements that the organization did with our local host organizations, which were involved in a number of the SDGs. And it was during that time that I found just energetically that I was continually drawn to our partners that were working in food systems and in agriculture more particularly. And so I decided after about 1.5 years there that I was going to, when my contract finished, that I was going to spend some time working on farms and traveling throughout the area. That led to a 6-week stay on a permaculture farm, which ended up connecting me to another permaculture farm in southern Nicaragua. And so I had moved up to this farm and ended up spending 3 years there as their program coordinator and farm manager. The farm in southern Nicaragua was a 26-acre demonstrative permaculture farm working mainly with tree crops and agroforestry systems, and was an educational space. So working with the local community as well as international students and university and gap year programs to teach about regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of, I think, names today, but it was agroecology, regenerative agriculture, permaculture. And it was during my time there that I started getting really interested or feeling like I wanted to build up more quantitative skills in my toolkit so we could see the awesome work that this 20-year-old farm had done, just looking at the tree systems and seeing the productivity, but wanted to understand more like the impact on the soil, understanding what types of analysis were out there that could help farms and projects communicate what that impact looked like. And so started looking at master's degrees, ended up at the Agriculture, Food, and the Environment program at Tufts University, which is within the Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. And coming back to the Northeast, I'm originally from Philadelphia, so coming to the Boston area after some 4.5 years abroad, I really wanted to focus those 2 years of grad school on New England and domestic food systems. I wanted to take the opportunity in studying, you know, within the master's and really getting an understanding of what was happening in food systems work and agriculture up here. And so it was during that first year of grad school that I learned about the UNH Sustainability Institute, saw the fellowship opportunities that were posted for the summer, and ended up pursuing a fellowship with the Gulf of Maine Research Institute based out of Portland, Maine. And so spent the summer with UNH and GMRI working on a project that GMRI had done a lot of ecosystem-based modeling and economic modeling for 4 fishing ports on what climate change impact would look like on fisheries, and was doing a lot of work in looking through what adaptation options would be for these 4 different fishing ports. I was super excited to be working with seafood and a fishing industry, which I had no background or knowledge in, and it's obviously a very important cornerstone, especially of the Northeast food system. And so my role was mainly focused around taking a lot of the scientific data and knowledge and analysis that they had done and working to fit that into community reports so that the information could be shared back to these port and fishing communities. I had an incredible opportunity. I was the same cohort as Julia. Loved the fellowship program, the UNH team, and all the mentors that were part of that. And then in my second year of grad school, kind of shifted back towards looking at taking more international focused coursework, looking at NGO opportunities for when I graduated, and ended up getting the job as an impact analyst at Root Capital, where I've been for a bit over a year now. And just quickly, Root Capital is an NGO that's focused on impact investing in small to medium-sized agricultural businesses. We work in Mexico, Central America, some parts of South America, as well as in East and West Africa and Indonesia. And as an impact analyst, I work on our monitoring and evaluation team. And so I'm looking at the different tools we use to measure and communicate impact of the different lending and advisory programs that we work with. And we are very fortunate this summer to also have a fellow, Ariela Sela is working with us on a climate change and social and environmental industry risk project this summer as a part of the fellowship as well.
Great, well, thank you, Sabrina. So it's really interesting that one of the themes I'm hearing between the three of you is it's kind of the way you really have like leaned into what you've been drawn to, that you're following your interests and your passion and what's in your heart. So I'm just curious if you have thoughts to share about like where you are in your career now. How much was plan and how much was luck or happenstance? And you know, just how does that fit into how you see where you may be headed? That can be for any of you if any of you want to jump in on that.
I could jump in on that one for a few minutes. I mean, I feel like when I went into grad school, I really didn't have a clear sense, other than I was interested in sustainable communities in general. It really was something that I was becoming more and more interested in. I was reading about in my spare time. So I feel like I really entered my grad planning program just sort of wide open. But it was really in my first semester in my economics class, I was just very randomly reading through the New York Times. I think it was the business section, and there was a whole spread on the city of Seattle's food waste program and how it was really starting to expand and grow. And I hadn't even, at the time, I had not even heard of anything like that. It really blew my mind. And we were doing a project for our class, and I just went up to my teacher and I said, I don't know anything about this, but I want to do the project on this concept and for the city of Portland. I really didn't know. And it just really felt like a turning point for me and felt very unplanned. For somebody who was in a planning program, it was very unplanned. And it just has kind of felt like that since. It's been kind of just a bit of a wild ride, but great, at the same time. And I feel really fortunate that, there's just so much momentum. It was, at the time, it felt like the momentum was very early on, but it was there, and it was still, you were kind of trying to figure out if it was going to really sustain the momentum. But it's been very clear in this industry that it's growing and growing, and it seems like there's just more and more people who are getting involved or have been involved, but we're all talking with one another more openly now. So it's been really, really an interesting experience for me these last 10 years in particular.
Any thoughts on luck versus planning?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, and something I think about too sometimes, of like if you just kind of fall into the positions, or how it all happens. But yeah, like I mentioned, regionally, just like Francophone Africa has been really interesting to me the past couple of years and through undergrad. And when I was looking for jobs, I was really interested in continuing to do that work. But of course, usually that's hard to find, things that are specifically geared toward French-speaking Africa. So when I happened on Gaia, and then it happened to be in Providence, which there's nonprofits definitely in Providence, but most of them aren't internationally focused, they're mostly local. And so it all kind of seems serendipitous. Yeah, so I think part of it is like following what you think is interesting, and but also the things that come up may not always fall exactly with what you had studied in undergrad, where things academia is super different from working in an industry or a field. So being able to also shift after. And so I think like through my interest in, you know, regionally, so Francophone Africa, and that kind of shared history, I've learned a ton of different skills through Gaia in my work here. So like about nonprofits and about public health that I didn't necessarily have the experience in beforehand.
Great. I'm happy to share a bit as well. And yeah, I would say I think a lot of it's had to do with like luck and small world circumstances, and then also with a healthy mix of planning. I would say the first 4 years, I feel like I was very much like ping-ponging based on random interactions that I was having and people that were recommending like next steps within the food and agriculture space. And even the 3-year position I took at Nicaragua was because the woman I was farming with in Argentina, her daughter had done some building work at this farm in Nicaragua, and she connected me onwards to the project managers there. And then even thinking for my first connection with Root Capital, so I followed Root Capital's work since undergrad. I knew I was very interested in their work, and a friend from high school who I had mentioned it to while I was living in Nicaragua ended up meeting a Root Capital employee in an overnight hut on a hike in the White Mountains. And when they were talking about his work, he had been like, oh, I think my friend has talked about your organization before. And this was like the first informational phone interview that I had gotten at Root Capital probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And then, yeah, I would say with the luck and just looking for different opportunities where I was in more recent years, I think I put more like dedicated attention towards really planning what could set me up for the career that I had kind of started honing in on after a few years of lots of experimental work and trajectories.
Great, thanks. Well, we do have a couple other questions. So let's see, we have Rachel. Rachel, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi there. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time today. I'm an intern. I'm currently working with Paper Crane Associates doing nonprofit consulting. So I think my question kind of could go for any one of you. And I'm sort of wondering, I'm noticing some themes in your background. So some more direct sort of service work on farms or with farmers markets. That type of work, and then sort of the wider scope policy or systems or industry work. And I was wondering if any of you could speak to maybe the transition from one to the other or the differences in that type of work, anything like that. Thanks.
Yeah, I can comment. Yeah, I think this is my first like full-time office job, and so it's interesting going from working in Rwanda last year where I was teaching and like interacting directly with students, or like when I was an undergrad and working directly with other adult students or whoever it was. So it is a transition, and not necessarily as exciting on the day to day. A lot of it's spent answering emails and in an office alone. But that's also like where the work gets done, even if it's not as exciting. And a really important part of it too is like, coordinating with the staff in Mali or here in Providence, and all of that needs to happen like for the successful operation, and like all the backgrounds that might necessarily not necessarily be as exciting. But yeah, transitioning was tough, partly in just like sitting at a desk all day, but partly I didn't have the background skills in like grant writing, for example, or managing the finances, things like that. So there's a ton of trial and error, and just like learning from other people, like my boss, has been really, really important, just to kind of, it's a lot of self-learning too that isn't necessarily the same as when you're a student and you're being taught explicitly in school what to do or how to do an assignment. So you have to be comfortable just being a self-advocate and taking the time to research something by yourself, even if it makes you want to pull your hair out sometimes.
I can chime in a little bit. I feel like for me, even like as a reporter, you still have to go out and find your stories, and you're really in charge of a geographic beat, and getting to know the towns that you're covering, the issues you're covering. So in a way, it's a little bit of an entrepreneurial sort of approach in a funny way. So I think that kind of geared me a little bit for starting a business with some others. But it's really hard to prepare yourself for starting a business. It's like a challenge like I've never experienced before, especially in an industry that I had no background in, really was learning as we went. I remember the first time we were starting, to reach out to restaurants in Portland, and started to get really worried that the local waste energy plant was going to impose flow control on us and not let us take the material. Like, it was all such a mystery, and but I think that the theme and the key for getting through all that was really just communicating with people and realizing, sometimes you can get through those fears or mysteries pretty quickly just by having a conversation with somebody and realizing that that's not necessarily the case. Now as an employee, it's been nice, and some of those skills have been developed, but it's still an industry that's evolving so fast that I feel like I'm constantly trying to keep up with the changing landscape, and landfilling and taking trash by rail out of the region, which seems wild to me. There's like so much stuff that's happening all the time now, So it's a constant education and a challenge, which I think is partly what I like about what I am doing. But it's never stationary. But I would certainly not claim to be an expert. I'm really trying to continue to keep on top of it all.
Yeah, and I can also touch briefly on that. Yeah, and I think, yeah, in general, I would say that there's huge positives to both. I would say that in the farming and from a farming and agricultural perspective, farming has been some of the most valuable work experience I've ever had, and I don't think I could work. I feel like it's added so much value to working on the back end of, analyzing farming systems and reading agricultural data from a desk job in my current role. And then I think more in the international development space, it's offered this is also my first full-time desk job based in the US. And I would say as a big plus, it's offered a lot more stability. It's great being closer to family. Right now, it's great to not have the stress of travel, and also, yeah, it's less stress on, I think, your body not moving back and forth in that way. And then, but also I think this job has created a really happy medium where before the COVID crisis and the pandemic, I've been able to spend time in the field, which I think is really valuable, especially in the work that we do for impact measurement and management, but also been able to grow in the kind of back end side, similar to what Julia said. I'm getting a lot of experience that I might not have gained from just the field-based work I was doing before, and that's been really valuable as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich, for that question and all those interesting answers. So we also have a question from Isabella, if you want to share.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm Isabella. I'm interning with the Small Business Development Center of New Hampshire this summer. And my question is mostly about waste management, but it could be addressed from the lens of, from the other way, before we consume our food too, with the farmers market and agriculture. But my question really is about what role the, I guess, local or maybe even state government plays in how we deal with our waste, and with working with nonprofits and other for-profit businesses. What kind of relationship do you have to have with your local governments to kind of make the system work for everybody?
That's a great question. I've seen a lot of different examples of where municipalities really taken a lead role in getting specifically, say, food waste programs underway. Like, I live in South Portland, and South Portland and Scarborough are two towns right in the Portland area that took the lead, took the initiative to start pilot programs and just to generate awareness and to get some traction. And that was, really something that, from what I understand, came from, a show of interest from the residents. So I think voicing out, if you don't have a program in your town and you would like to have some kind of option, whether it's an actual curbside collection service or a transfer station program, talking to the town of Durham, with their waste committee members, they were saying that they were getting lots of interest and that there has been some efforts going on in recent years to do that, and it's been going on, but they want to grow it. But they know the traction is there, and they've done surveys and the responses have shown that there is the interest to take it to the next step. So I think that local leaders can play a big role in getting those types of programs together. And the other big piece is just taxation. Folding your trash into your property tax is an issue that we've run into in a lot of rural parts of Maine, because it's sort of viewed as a free service. So even if you have a curbside program and you want to charge $10 to $15 a month, that's more money than you're currently paying. So it's sort of a disincentive to do the right thing, whether it's recycling or food waste. So I think just doing some policy changes like that can make a big difference as well. But it really does come, we do work with some towns throughout the region. Needham, Mass is one, but a lot of smaller towns in Maine, and where the interest is there and the intentions are good, but it's also just hard to maintain that the sort of the ongoing outreach to residents to make sure that they remember that it's happening, that the program participation remains high, because that's where a town can get the value in a program like that. So it's really up to everyone to make sure that that's a visible and recurring sort of message to the towns, to the residents. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the, where I see it, where I run into it a lot at that level.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We have some more questions. Any of the other interns or fellows want to chime in? Ariella, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It was great to hear a little bit about everyone who I don't know yet. So thanks so much for that. So our webinar series are framed within the context of our Sustainable Development Goals, not the Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically, this one is called Public Health and Sustainable Food Systems. And that's not necessarily a connection that a lot of people immediately make, right? When you say public health, you think of epidemiology and you think of more diagnostic medicine, at least for me personally. So I'm wondering how you see your organization and your personal work sort of bridging these two fields that, I think we're increasingly starting to more obviously see the connection, but I'm just wondering, how you and the organization that you work for sort of conceptualize that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it because we have a kind of direct link. So Gaia, we work, well, it was founded initially to work on HIV and AIDS in Mali because at the time, which is about 20 years ago, there was no HIV care at the community clinic level. Now it's becoming a bit more common. and ARBs, which are the medication that suppresses HIV, are more commonplace. But we provide those at the community clinic level, which is not the case mostly. Sorry, kind of confusing. But so we also have other programs that we run. So we work primarily with 2 community clinics in Bamako, right outside of Bamako, which is the capital of Mali. But so we also provide, so of course we provide the ARB medication and the counseling to show people how to use the medication and all of that, but we also have programs that are nutrition based for HIV positive patients, and the meals are actually cooked by HIV positive women in the community, because there's a ton of stigma surrounding HIV. So a lot of times people don't want to get tested, they won't tell you if they're HIV positive, which is an even bigger problem in Mali because there's polygamy is quite commonplace, so it can spread really, really easily, and people might not talk about it or be willing to share their HIV status. So having programs like our nutrition program, which not only provides healthful meals twice per week to HIV positive individuals and their families, but it also helps to kind of combat stigma surrounding HIV in the community. So that's one example.
Yeah, you can also speak to it. So from Root Capital, Root Capital is mainly investing in coffee and cocoa make up the large majority of the portfolio. Investments that we make in small to medium-sized agricultural businesses, and Root Capital's theory of change in many ways is that investing in this missing middle in these small to medium enterprises, which throughout our portfolio are mostly cooperatives, that this has the ability to improve farmer livelihoods and have an impact on the communities in which these businesses work. And for some of the impact metrics that we do look at access to healthcare, food security and nutrition programs, and they're a part of our due diligence and data collection as well. And then, as you know, there's also a lot of research being done in how we can invest in local value chains. Specifically, we're looking at East and West Africa for grains that are both food crops and have industry value. Specifically, Ariel is helping us in researching maize, rice and sorghum value chains in these markets. And in part, while these are riskier from an investment standpoint, it's thought that they have a broader impact, or a larger impact and a more profound impact on farmer livelihoods. And so I think the food security and nutrition component gets brought in there as well. And then, yeah, on a personal level, it's definitely part of the reason why I chose the AFE program within the Friedman School of Nutrition, because I think that there is an inherent link, and that an unhealthy food system can be directly related to an unhealthy public health system, and that they are both crucial in supporting one another.
I would just say real quickly that I guess like in our work with AgriCycle, working with universities and corporations and towns is, I think first and foremost, we also work with food banks in Maine and Massachusetts and Vermont, and we're talking to the New Hampshire Food Bank right now about starting up a program, but just making sure, first of all, that, one of the things that we've been hearing from food banks is they often are dumping grounds for food that isn't really good at that point, because it's cheaper to donate than it is. So just making sure that any of the partners that we work with who aren't food banks, making sure that we get the material that isn't suitable for human consumption, but they're also donating the materials that are good for human consumption. And we work hand in hand with some of those food banks on that outreach. And then I think the other piece, and just also making that part of our sales pitch to, the Walmarts and the Amazons and the universities, anybody who might be ending up with food waste that can be donated, is just making sure that they're always looking to that as a first option versus giving it to us. And then the other piece is just through climate change, looking at food waste. If it were a country, it would be the third largest emitter in the world of emissions. So it's a big big piece. So as all these different efforts through these different composting programs, anaerobic digestion, any way that we can pull food waste out of the landfill, that's going to ultimately touch public health as well. So I guess that's sort of where we interface with that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in, Greg. Sorry, did somebody want to say something?
I was just going to say thank you so much. That was really helpful from everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, Greg, I mean, I work closely with the New Hampshire Food Bank, and, you know, I really applaud them for the work that they've been doing to, you know, not just feed people, but nourish people, and that really the quality of the food that they distribute, really recognizing the ties between that and public health and health outcomes for people, and really working to improve it and have, you know, specific KPIs around protein and fresh fruits and vegetables and such, and so that it's not just food, but it's true nourishment, which
Right.
people deserve. So yeah, great. Well, we only have 2 minutes left, so I guess I wanted to hit on this if the panel is willing. Any advice for the students who will maybe are or soon will be looking at the job market, and not the easiest time necessarily to be looking for a job right now. I know I originally graduated in a recession and I went back to grad school, but any thoughts for the students about job searching?
I would just say keep telling people what you're interested in, what you want to do. I think the more people you tell that to and say it out loud, the more you're kind of testing your own thoughts, but you're also just putting it out there, and somebody might say, oh, well, you know, just like Sabrina was saying, through these different connections, you end up doing these different jobs. And I think the more people who know what you're interested in, the better chance you'll land where you want to be.
Yeah, I would definitely second what Greg said, and just continue to connect with people, continue to ask for informational interviews, and put yourself out there, stating your interests. And yeah, I think the food and ag space has always felt a little bit small as well. And so I think even a few years ago, people would say the same thing, just continue to connect with people and reach out. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of those things. Something I did while I was still living in Rwanda was reach out to people for informational interviews. So you can play on your college network or even the UNH Sustainability Fellows Network, or just reach out to people for organizations that you are interested in working for, and just ask. I think it's really helpful just to hear about people's career paths sometimes, and usually it's not a straightforward line. I think it never is, pretty much. So sometimes it's useful to hear that and hear what kind of opportunities they did, and you never know what's going to come out of it.
Great, good advice. Faina or Megan, anything to wrap up today?
Yeah, just thank you so much to all of you, Lisa and Julia and Greg and Sabrina. I think that was a nice note to end on, Julia, that very few people have a straight line career path. So it was great to hear about all of your paths and how you got to where you are. And also, I love that the conversation came around to the fact that public health and food systems and climate change are all so connected, which is why we try to ground all of this work in the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think really make that point. So anyway, thank you all. It's after 2 o'clock, so I want to let you go, but it's really been a pleasure to hear your stories. And please keep in touch with us and with each other. Everybody connect on LinkedIn after we let you go. As a reminder, 2 weeks from now, we will have our final bonus webinar, which will be focused on social justice and racial equity, which I know we've all been talking a lot about this summer, so I'm really looking forward to that. And with that, we'll let you all go. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.